Ready, go ahead and start whenever you're ready.
Well, I wanted to introduce folks. So welcome to Indigenous Foods Education and Research with Mae Hey and Martin Reinhardt. In this session, Dr. Hey will discuss the land-centered learning experiences she's developing at Virginia Tech to support local food security, food sovereignty, and the revitalization of traditional foodways and human-nature relationships. Dr. Reinhardt will build on this discussion and deepen it through describing his work with treaty food provisions and the Decolonizing Diet Project, which is an exploratory study of the relationships between humans and indigenous foods of the Great Lakes region. Additionally, he will explain his study of treaties signed between the US and American Indian tribes to determine which ones contained food provisions and implications for the contemporary food sovereignty movement. Mae and Marty, you are both extraordinary educators and teachers, and you position your students in community with one another and with place and relations in ways that they remember for the rest of their lives. Thank you so much for being here at the Symposium Sampler and for sharing your knowledge with us, because I know that you empower your students that in ways that just allow them to live and influence change in a good way. Rachel and I are part of the planning committee, and we're here to support you, Marty and Mae, by sharing questions from the chat, technical assistance if you need that, and by helping to keep track of time. And Rachel and I are here for participants too. Let us know if there's anything we can help with using the chat or the Q&A. That's also a good way to ask questions. And I've got one question for the presenters before I turn it over. And that is, would you like to save questions for the end, or would you like to pause a couple times and converse mid-presentation?
I think Dr. Reinhardt said that he wanted to save them for the end, and I'm cool with that.
All right, let's save them for the end.
All right.
I'd like to turn it over to you both. Thank you so much.
Good, Abby.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mae.
Okay, I can't see myself. Am I in the frame here? I don't know how to.
And you look wonderful.
Oh, hey, there I am. I'm here. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Mae Hey, and I'm here with my backup dancer. Oh, my. That is she's my student. She's my bestie. Her name is Melissa, and I'm like so bad with like computers and phones and Zoom and like all that kind of stuff. So we're here together, and I'm really thankful this morning to be on the beautiful Monacan and Tutelo lands here at Virginia Tech. And I kind of just saw that clip of Pokagon there, I think it was, and I thought, oh man, I kind of wish I was with you all in person in Michigan, but that's gonna happen soon. So anyhow, this morning I was kind of thinking we'd kind of look at our garden here, and maybe a little bit about my background too. Is my first degree was in geology, but it was in human nature relationships. So when they actually asked me to be a geologist and kind of to go into the earth and like take stuff that I'm not sure we were supposed to be taking, because my mom, she used to put our Halloween candy like way up high so we didn't like gorge ourselves on it all at once. And a lot of the things I was being asked to take from the earth were kind of like along that nature, like stuff that was out of my reach. And I'm not sure we were supposed to be taking it. So I looked at human nature relationships, like how people see different opportunities in the land, and how that shapes our behavior, and how it makes us or doesn't make us good relatives. So the courses I work with here at Virginia Tech are in helping students to understand that relatedness. I can see your hand, Melissa. Oops, sorry. I'm having technical difficulty here. So let's see. I wish I didn't say so much, but let's see. Okay, so from the human nature relationships thing, I became a teacher, and my most recent degree is in Indigenous worldview and science education, focusing on how nature is our primary instructor. So I got involved with this group because I went to go visit tribes during a postdoctoral sort of position I had here at Virginia Tech. And when I visited the tribes, I listened a lot. And what came out is people were concerned about food security, food sovereignty, and the revitalization of their traditional foodways. And I would visit a lot of agricultural places, and there wasn't any food being grown. And when you go to the grocery store, there was, I remember one time I was coming back from a powwow and I stopped to get some strawberries because it was strawberry season and they tasted like floor cleaner. And I was like, this is really a concern of mine too. So I applied for a bunch of scholarships to be involved with the Native American Food Sovereignty Alliance and with Intertribal Ag. And through the help of those good people and all the other wonderful friends that come to those, I've learned a lot of things about I've gotten seeds, I've learned about gardening, I've gotten connected with people, I've learned some more cooking. Also, this is like maybe a side note too, is when I was in school to pay for 2 of my degrees, I was a baker and I was a cook, and my job as a cook was to turn whatever was made yesterday into soup today. So it's not like I wasn't like kind of raw into the cooking. I used to garden all the time with my grandfather, but that was the only experience I have. And I share that because, you know, in case somebody else is looking for like, how do I get involved in this? Like, I wasn't inherently involved. In my applications, I said, you know, like whatever you all are willing to teach me and show me and share with me, I will try and like magnify here and share with other people. So I'm committed to this work 100%. So what we have here, and we're gonna maybe kind of pan around a little bit here, but we have on this land that I'm standing on a turfgrass research center. Turfgrass being a non-native monoculture. And we requested that these rhizomes be unzipped for us. And it really did sound like that when they ran the machine through here that first time, and it hasn't been tilled since then. We've just worked with it with burning and things like that. But we have a space within this space of turfgrass research with an Indigenous community garden. And what was maybe the first thing that was interesting is once the land was unzipped, there were enduring seeds in the soil that sprang forth immediately. And a lot of those plants, well, all of those plants are food. You know, maybe people call them weeds or whatever, but they're really delicious. And so maybe we'll start at the end of the garden here, because one of the first things that happened was we were told that our garden was messy because we leave a lot of traditional edibles that people consider as weeds. And we kind of had to hide that from people like driving by, whatever. So Melissa, let's like kind of oh, okay, we can, did it turn around? I think no. Oh, there it is. Okay, that's Melissa's hand. Okay, now at the far end of the garden there, I don't know if you can see it. We could probably walk that way too. See, well, you can see all the turf too. But down at the end there, we have sunchokes. And so in the distance, we have a road, and people were seeing the garden from the road. So to hide all the sort of wild edibles, we planted all these sunchokes. The sunchokes are really nice. They're like a traditional potato when you dig up the roots, but they're especially nice because they're tall. You can see the birds playing in them right there. They flower when the students come back, which is really nice because a lot of the garden stuff happens in the summer. And I'm hoping Marty will talk more about his summer program because I'd like to learn more about that too. But our students plant our stuff in the summer, or sorry, in the spring, and then it happens in the summer. And so it's nice to have the big sunchokes are called ashkiwa in Anishinaabe one. It's nice to have them flower in the spring. So we have also, if you kind of look down, we have some, I don't know if you can see, oh my gosh, that's such a pretty picture in the little screen there. Yeah. we have oh my gosh, look at this, like he's a Kusha there. about as big as my leg. I don't know. And we have some amaranth. That's all like coming back from last year. A lot of the garden too, you can kind of see like kind of dead looking sunflowers, but we leave those because the birds still like them. And they'll reseed themselves. And a lot of them have beans planted on them. We grow Seminole pumpkins here also. We get a lot of seeds from our relative Amy Rose Full of the Virginia Free Farm. She shares seeds with us and comes and visits with us. I don't kind of want to walk all the way up to the top of the garden, but you just can see kind of like the scope of what we got going on here. It's not super big, but there's a lot going on, whether it's stuff we planted or stuff that just, oh, we got ground cherries, Melissa says right here. Stuff that volunteers. And what we do also is when we harvest things like pumpkins, we replant those areas with like winter greens and things like that to keep the ground covered. Something else maybe interesting about this space too is you see there's surrounding it are like these woods. And people might say, oh, like nobody's using those woods. Those woods are like a barrier between this area and the neighborhood. And there's woods over here. But we also do things with those woods in terms of teaching people maybe why we make land acknowledgements. People sometimes don't understand maybe the grammar of the landscape that they how do we flip this around again? Oops. Oh, sorry. I'm gonna hold that again for me. It flips around. Oh, maybe I didn't flip it. Sometimes people don't understand the grammar of the landscape that they live on in terms of previous work that was done. So we engage our students in doing that work. So those woods are now, or they were also before, but the students and I, and also faculty and community members, we go in there and we plant wild plums, hickory, pawpaw. There's a hazelnut tree we planted too that's doing real good. So we plant fruit and nut trees in there. What's the time at? So I want to give Martin has a whole bunch of stuff he wants to talk about, and I kind of think of myself as like he's the headliner, and I'm like the warm up the crowd person. So this is just like I said, if you're wanting to get into this and you have maybe like you have an after school program with kids, or you have a community that's wanting to like make a garden space. Some of the garden spaces we work in that are not this one, this is a reclaimed space. Like if that wasn't made clear, this is a turf grass research center, and we've carved out a little niche of it for growing food. We also work in gardens in inner city Richmond, which were vacant lots, and they were sort of, again, eyes with opportunity. The Indigenous Society of Richmond saw an opportunity to start growing food. They started growing food, and this is in work with Amy Rose Full. And we help harvest the food too and put it in 5 different fridges in inner city Richmond. So there's a lot of work that can be done in terms of like seeing different opportunities and monocultures that are around us and getting people we love, you know, whether it's our community or kids we know or neighbors or anyone into you know, working with their hand, getting their hands in the dirt, especially during times of COVID. It's been really good for us here to just be able to connect. My students write a reflection every week about things they're reading and their experiences here and what they're thankful for. And it's been really like healing during times of COVID. And sometimes in their reflection, they'll say that one of the things they enjoyed was just being in the sunshine or running their fingers through the grass as we talk, or putting their hands in the dirt, or things like that. So the nature gives off a lot of good energy. And there's a quote maybe from Richard Wagamisi that I'd like to share maybe before I end. And I shared it with my students the other day, is that we don't become better because we work with the land necessarily, or, you know, bigger or more important or anything. It helps us find the right size to be. And so I think I've said enough about that. and Yamu, which Vizindamig. So that's it. Thank you for listening. And go, Marty.
Miigwech, Mae. It's a beautiful place you have there. And, if you're not friends with Mae on Facebook, you really should be, because, Mae makes some really cool foods and they're just beautiful. Kind of like her hat there and her clothing. It's just reflective of all these colors, and it just makes you happy to see the stuff that Mae's doing. So miigwech, Mae.
Marty, can I say one more thing? Because you
Absolutely,
mentioned
yeah.
that a friend of mine on Facebook, can you pan down, made me this dress. Okay, you got to back up. You got to see the whole thing. And it was to show the colors of the food that I was making to share. I'm just trying to I think eating and being with the land should be ceremony. And, however we can share that with other people. And also it has been really good for me and healthy for me to make eating and being with the land ceremony. And so miigwech Jessica Metz for making me this dress. I met her through American Indian Science and Engineering Society, and we talked about Indigenous education. And so thanks, Marty, for mentioning
Very
that.
nice. Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to share a little bit about the Decolonizing Diet Project and treaties. And let's see. So this first slide here, this is my wife, Tina Moses. We're out at Lac Vieux Desert, and we're wild ricing. And, we neither my wife nor I grew up going out and wild ricing. So this is after a couple years of doing this. And we got spoiled our first year. We went out with Don Chosa, Carlene Chosa, and they're, Don's a rice chief. And, so he's really good at it. And when we went out with them, we got spoiled because we got 80 pounds that year. And we didn't know that, 80 pounds is pretty good for, novice wild rice harvesters. But we thought that everybody did that. So, the following year we got 15 pounds. We thought, oh, geez, we didn't, really do what we should have done. Thinking we should go back and get a few more lessons from Don and Carlene. And then this year we only got 5 pounds. So we were like, oh man, we really need some lessons. But this was also a year that we had a major storm when we were out there. And so we didn't get out much on the lake that year, and we were pressed for time. But, that really does say something about the condition that we find ourselves in relationship to our food. Time becomes the commodity, right? That we don't have much of to do the things that we need to be doing, to do the kind of things that Mae was talking about just now with the garden and the world around her, the recentering, and not worrying so much about the schedule of having to get back to the university to do office hours and grade papers. That's a big difference. Not that that's not important. So the Decolonizing Diet Project was focused on the Great Lakes region. And so it, followed the height of the land and the water basin for the Great Lakes region. And it took in parts of Minnesota, just west of the Mississippi, or Michizzibi, all of Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, parts of Pennsylvania and New York, and parts of Ontario. And, I didn't mean to create this image. It was just connecting the dots after we did we put together this region from the water basin, the Great Lakes water basin, also based on Helen Hornbeck Tanner's principal cultural theater for the Great Lakes, and also a vernacular approach where we asked people, do you consider your community part of the Great Lakes region? And so when we got done with that 3-part definition, we connected the lines, and it kind of looks like a bear's head, if you look at it, which is really cool. My Graham's clan is Bear Clan, and so we have both Bear Clan and Crane Clan in our family, and it just really neat the way it came out like that. So we think it's important to define how we define Indigenous foods, and I think that there are at least 2 major ways that people often do in the Indigenous foods movement. One is very important, and that's the foods in relationship to themselves. These are the plants and animals that we call food. They're spirit beings, and they've been here without us, and they know each other, and they welcomed us into their lands. And so they have their own sovereignty, and we need to respect that. as well. And then there's the relationship that we have with them, that we think of as our food, right? This indigenous people's foods. And I always tell people, make sure you capitalize the I, right? Because it's important that we make that the standard for people to talk about this. We elevate it. And we also elevate it in a spiritual connection. And so we may have that in our families. We may have this connection that goes way back. Some families lost it. And so we're trying to revitalize it in our communities and our families. And so that's very important how we do that. And those teachers are sometimes other people, books, classes. Sometimes it's the foods themselves that teach us about them. For the Decolonizing Diet Project, we included certain foods, and certain foods we did not include. So we have categories of what we call eligible foods for the Decolonizing Diet Project. That includes native pre-colonials. This is foods that were here, the ones that welcomed us to this region as humans. They were not introduced by humans, either deliberately or accidentally. And so, like, that would include wild rice. It would include a lot of those plants that Mae was talking about. There's the introduced pre-colonials. These are the ones that we did introduce as humans into the Great Lakes region. That includes the Three Sisters, corn, beans, and squash, and other foods that were brought up maybe from parts further south. And so, we did introduce those as humans into this region. And then both of those categories, we have the derivations from them. So like the let's see, what is it? The Pekin duck. It's in the Aflac commercials. That is a mallard. It's a domesticated mallard duck. And mallards were here by them, before humans. We have these other foods that have derived from the original strains of corn, beans, and squash now, the varieties. And so literally thousands of varieties of corn exist out there. The foods that we did not include, excuse me, as part of the Decolonizing Diet Project was anything introduced post 1600. We set our date at 1600. The earliest recorded interaction we have between native people here and colonizers was in 1602 over by Montreal. And so we thought that 1600 would have been among the earliest that we would have seen this kind of interaction in the Great Lakes region between colonized foods and indigenous peoples. Anything that derived from those foods we did not include. We also did not include anything that was considered genetically modified, or GMOs, or frankenfoods. We created a master food list that included plants, mammals, fish, birds, fish, fungi, insects, amphibians, reptiles, mussels, and other. And where we could, we included the Latin name or the scientific name, common names, and Anishinaabe names. And so as Mae was talking about Ashkiwa, sunchokes, we're always looking for different terminologies that people use for the native names for these plants and animals. The outcomes, we really approached the study from 3 different perspectives: a biological, cultural, and legal political perspectives. I'm just going to go through the outcomes real quick based on those dimensions. On a biological level, we found through our statistical analysis of our group data, we had 25 research participants. I don't call them subjects, or at least I try not to. But that's one of the things that we did go through an institutional review board, and we treated it as a scientific study. And when we did our statistical analysis, we found that we did have statistically significant reductions in weight and in girth. And of course, there's a constant when you put those together with age. It's called BMI. And so we are able to report, as it has been reported now in medical journals and is actually being taught in medical schools now, the outcomes of the Decolonizing Diet Project in that respect. We also had individuals who experienced either statistically significant or noteworthy, at least that's just below statistical significance, reductions in blood pressure, cholesterol, and blood glucose levels. So you think about that, 2 of the primary killers of indigenous peoples, is heart disease and obesity or diabetes. things that come from obesity. And we address them just simply by eating indigenous foods in this. And then, of course, a lot of folks suffer from high blood pressure. And, so we also address that, although I'll come back to that idea in a second here. On a sociocultural level, I think we also have some very significant outcomes from the Decolonizing Diet Project. We found that family and community support were very significant. That was in line with other studies that had been done, like the documentary Good Meat, where they found that family community support was very significant, and the Alert Bay study in British Columbia. Transformation of space to accommodate the needs for indigenous diets is very important. Literally we were transforming our shelves and our freezer space and drying racks and everything else. I mean, you really do have to make space in your life for these foods. They are not, they're not the kind of foods that you're going to go down the aisle at the supermarket and find, or going to a restaurant, unless it's a Sean Sherman's restaurant, right, a Wamney. But it didn't used to be like that. There wasn't a whole lot of indigenous food available at restaurants. The time commitment is a major source of anxiety. This is hard work. Indigenous foods is hard work. It's messy. You've seen John Greendeer's video there, from Pokagon, and I was surprised he was wearing such a beautiful ribbon shirt, because, man, if I'm doing, tanning hides, I'm not wearing a good ribbon shirt. But anyway, obviously he was much better at it than I was. We had a small impact on our local markets here in the Marquette area, but we had a really large impact for certain businesses. So the Marquette Food Co-op, they started labeling stuff as DDP friendly. The local fish, Phil's Fish, they started making us food, or fish, smoking fish, using just indigenous products. We also found that there was a different expectations for males and females, even with native and non-native. And so, at the beginning, there was expectations that, males were going to go out hunt and fish, and females were going to be doing like gardening and gathering. But by the end of the year, we were kind of balancing out in, both of those extremes. Price and convenience are and were the major factors for food access. And when we started off the DDP with 10 native research subjects and 15 non-native, when we finished, we had 12 native and 7 non-native. People died from starvation, and then I'm just kidding. No, we had opt-in up to 6 months, and then opt-out up to 6 months. On a legal and political level, we found that treaty rights and boundaries made a big difference in access to foods between native and non-native tribes. And so, you had people who didn't have what they would consider treaty rights, although we reminded them that they wouldn't have the right to state rights if it wasn't for the same treaties. And there's, of course, differences in limits, seasons, and other rules associated with the different governments that you get your license under. We also had organizational policies that were acted as barriers, like parking was limited, website access. And it was really strange, even though we were an approved university study at Northern Michigan University, we also had a policy that kept us from eating food that we wanted to eat, indigenous food on campus. We were not allowed to have potlucks because of safety reasons. So we just simply walked across the road, and then there's a basement kitchen at this church across the road from the Center for Native American Studies. They let us use that. So it was just that simple. And then I admit it, I smuggled food into theaters. I wanted to have my DDP eligible food when I watched a movie. And so I would do that, and I would do it at local restaurants, and they would get mad at me, and they'd say, hey, you're not allowed to bring food in here. And I was like, well, then I guess I won't be coming in here. And then, of course, I would explain to them why I was, and some were cool with it, some were not. We have some publications if you're looking for more information than what I'm presenting here. There is the cookbook, and I'm really pleased to see that there are so many cookbooks coming out now focused on indigenous foods. And I had a couple more added to the list just recently on Facebook. So if you're following our Facebook DDP website, you'll find those. And then we have the more academic report about the DDP. It's called Spirit Food, a multidimensional overview of the DDP. And that appears in Indigenous Innovation, Universalities, and Peculiarities. That was not my choice of title for the book. You know, some people find it a little bit strange, but it's kind of cool. Let's check it out. Other really good stuff in there too. Here's our Facebook site, our group site. The group site has the DDP master food list, which is an Excel file. You can download it. It's an ongoing list. It's an organic list, I should say. Sometimes people will argue you should have this on the list, and so we'll put it on the list. Some people will argue you shouldn't have that on the list. It's a medicine more than it is a food, and we'll take it off the list. So, you know, we haven't had much argument lately, but if you see something on the list that you think shouldn't be or should be on there, let us know. And then there's a lot of photos and a few videos on the Flickr site, but the Facebook site is the most interactive. So check out the Facebook site. It is moderated, so you have to request to be part of the Facebook site, but I rarely will not allow people on there, although I will take people off of there if they start posting like non-food stuff, and especially like stuff that shouldn't be shared with a big group professionally. So let me get right into some treaty food provisions. This is one of my favorite images. It's from an 1849 petition to the U.S. government from the Lake Superior bands of Ojibwe. And this is, you know, it shows in a clan family way. This is our dotems or clans from our region, Anishinaabe tribes. And the image on the right-hand side, that's a Crane clan. And then you see that the other clans are connected to the Crane, both from their eyes or their brains and also their hearts. And that's the way we're taught traditionally, is that you have to think with both your head and your heart. And that there's also a connection from the Crane to the Mother Earth herself, and, you know, the waters right there. And so it shows that, you know, this is a petition to the United States. It was carried by Wigwassa Gimon or Birch Bark Canoe and walked all the way to Washington, D.C. and presented to the President of the United States, saying you are misunderstanding our needs and the relationship, the promises that we made between our nations. And so essentially what they were saying is, you know, you cannot remove us from that which is vital to our spirit, and that is our food and our water. You know, this is our homeland, and it's our responsibility to take care of it. And so that was the message that they carried with them, and empowered that Crane person to speak, which is the line going off to the right end of the birch bark scroll that it was carried on. So I completed a content analysis of all of the treaties, all of them, between the American Indian tribes and the United States that were ratified by the U.S. Senate. You can find those at the Oklahoma State University. I use key terms, similar terms, and conceptual cluster searches to do my search of the treaties, and I read through them completely also. The U.S. entered into several treaties between 1778 and 1871. There are 372 actual treaties, and there are 13 treaty supplements, so you can do the math. In 1871, the U.S. Congress included a rider in the Indians Appropriations Act prohibiting further treaty making, thereby tying the hands of the executive branch of government, which was not challenged by the U.S. Supreme Court. And so it's a constitutional dilemma that was never challenged by the federal government. I'm not going to read through this entirely, but you can see that this is part of the treaty negotiation language, and I'm just going to read the English for you. Well, I will offer it to him that which he asks of me, the white pine. As far as you will cut, well, that's what I offer you. Not over here, not having roots. I don't offer that to you. And again, this which I hold, this maple, this oak, and this one grass which I hold, manumin, I so call it this, not these. I don't offer these to you. That's important treaty language, right? And you can see it's Anishinaabe in translations, and that's the bilingual petition regarding the treaty at Fond du Lac in 1864. That's important that we find these instances within both the treaties, but also within the treaty negotiations. The U.S. Supreme Court has some rules that they use to interpret treaties when it gets to that level, when we have challenges in court. These are called the canons of treaty construction, and there are 3 of them. Ambiguities in treaties must be resolved in favor of Indians. What is ambiguity? It can mean the meaning is unclear, it's dual meanings, there are different ways to interpret it. So ambiguity, I like the idea, what happens in vagueness stays in vagueness, like Las Vegas. Anyway, that's ambiguity, little joke. Indian treaties must be interpreted as Indians would have understood them. That means at the time that they were written. So that's why that treaty language, the negotiation language is important. Also, other ways we find meaning. Indian treaties must be construed liberally in favor of Indians, not conservatively, liberally. And so you think about it, how do we get a sense of how our ancestors understood things that are unclear in treaties? We don't have the hot tub time machine that we can take back to ask them, so we have to ask them in different ways. One is through our language, one is our oral tradition, and those, of course, are probably going to be biased toward a contemporary Indian understanding. Then there's also the early written accounts, and the early written accounts are obviously going to be biased toward a non-Indian perspective. But there's also artwork, just like the birch bark petition that I showed on the slide for this section. That's evidence. That's evidence about how we thought about these things. And of course, then there's other things like artifacts, physical artifacts, like things that you find through archaeological evidence, like clay pipes and things like that, bones, animal bones in our fire rings. Those are all pieces of evidence that tell us about the food relationships. And of course, we have to be careful. We don't want people digging up our ancestors. So there's good archaeology and bad archaeology, and we want to make sure that people understand what is okay and what is not okay behavior in our communities. So the findings. There are 295 of those 372 treaties and treaty supplements, including 734 articles. Articles are sections of treaties that contain food-related provisions. The major categories are hunting, fishing, and gathering, goods, provisions, and subsistence, support for farming and milling. And you can see that of the 295 treaties, the number of provisions in the treaties corresponding to those, 88 for rights to hunt, fish, and gather, goods, provisions, and subsistence, 204. Support for farming and milling, 186. And then the other category may be a mix of those ones above. It's just not clear that it's one or the other. But it also may be like pots and pans, that are meant for food relations or ammunition or things like that. Not necessarily one of those other three categories. Among the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi tribes, which I'm part of, and I wanted to do a subset. I looked at the 52, there are 52 treaties that our people signed here, including 107 articles. And of course, within those, there are the major categories: 25 rights to hunt, fish, and gather, 53 goods, provisions, and subsistence, and 60 for farming and milling, and 24 for other. That is all I have. I'm going to stop share now and let's see, end the show. And we're going to open it up for questions and answers or just general discussion until the end of our time, which we have about 20 minutes. Perfect, right, May?
Yeah, that was incredible. It was like you had an atomic clock. I was doubtful. I was like, I'm the worst with time.
So if anyone has any questions, I think if the moderators can help us identify the questions and pretend like there's questions if there is no questions, and ask us questions so we can fill our time.
Marty. Don't worry. We've got one quick question that's just sort of a housekeeping question. We've been able to share the link for the Decolonizing Diet Facebook project, or Facebook, and a couple other links there. It sounds like folks are also looking for the treaty site that you mentioned, Marty. Can you just give me a couple terms and maybe we can find it?
Kapplers, Kapplers, and treaties. If you just do a general Google search for those two terms, you will come up with the Oklahoma State University website.
Okay. Thanks. Rachel, would you be willing to start us off with what's in the Q&A?
Yeah, definitely. Our first question comes from Emily. She is directing that towards May. She's asking, assuming the space you've claimed is affiliated with the university, any tips for convincing administration to allow folks to reclaim land for food growing?
Well, okay, so our space isn't even like recognized or on a map or anything like that, and that's kind of a battle I'm still fighting. Like, I think it was like done, maybe even like how some of these treaties were done, you know, kind of agreements between neighbors, like, you know, good people agreeing to share with each other, and I don't know, from like, I don't know, I would say that to somebody. I was like, sometimes you also, like, from my end, maybe the only power I have is to just keep doing it and keep swirling more people into it to make it sustainable. If that makes sense. Now, that garden that we worked with in Richmond, where it was a vacant lot, and the Indigenous Society asked if, or they didn't ask, they just started gardening. And then now the city of Richmond like lets them use it. But again, like when are our, like, again, I like, these are not formal treaties, but when are they revoked? I don't know. Like, we might still be in the same boat. I don't know. And also, I wish it could always just be like as good neighbors and as relatives, and people just respect each other. And part of my work, I guess, in being a teacher is like, what's that phrase? Like the revolution will not be televised. Like, it starts in the minds of the people. Like, sometimes I'll ask people, you know, like, what am I doing here? And they'll say, you're teaching the most important lesson of all, is like how to help people know how to be good relatives. And like, now some of those kids, I taught 6th grade for years and years, and some of those kids are now like 35 years old, and they are my neighbors, and they're like the best people I've ever known. And so, you know, we just reach the people at our fingertips and, you know, help them try to be good relatives. And I don't know, like, because it seems when things are official, they sometimes get revoked anyhow. So I don't know if that really answered the question. At this point, they're trying to take the garden away from me again because I got attacked by bees, and I was like, I'm not upset about the bees. Just the bees are having a bad day, and I just wanted people to be aware, like, if people are gonna fool with the bees, that we probably shouldn't be there. And they said, well, we'll just take your garden away. And I was like, like, I wasn't that lady's teacher. So, you know.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah. So, you know, and then I talked with my students in my intro class. I was like, there's a story that was sent to me from the Okanagan people about Blue Coyote, and how sometimes we take on, like, Blue Coyote doesn't want to take on these responsibilities that are his alone. He gets frustrated and gets mad about it, and sometimes they are our responsibility alone. Sometimes we are educating people who are, you know, older and kind of set in their ways of not being good relatives, and it's still up to us to model. That wasn't that Gandhi that said that too, like, be the change you want to see in the world. And you know, that's a everyday battle, waking up, being thankful, trying to get your steps moving in a good way, and then try to drag as many people along with you, right? And not get frustrated in the process to kind of like backslide. So I don't know if I answered that question. Maybe you have some more to say about that, Martin, like your ideas for how we get access to land.
Well, you know, it's I think we're starting to understand what land back means to this generation, right? So maybe in older generations, maybe it was like, you know, getting our federal recognition and getting reservations recognized. Maybe land back is evolving along with the understanding, like what Mae's saying. You know, it's gotta be about the beliefs, both about, you know, from a native perspective, but also from a non-native perspective. You know, the longevity is to get it so widespread in the hearts and minds of people who make up the citizenry of the United States and Canada, that they can, it's just like, you know, yeah, of course, you know, we should the native people should be the ones who are, teaching others about how to have a good relationship with what these areas that we might call different things now. But I think it's healthy to know the history of the place that you live, and know how those things changed hands, like the ideas of ownership, how did they evolve, and to be able to explain to folks, how short term the regulation of access has been, and how it has changed things, often for the worst.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Martin, too. So like I have a little video that was made of stuff I'm doing around here, and the person who made it was through admissions, and she called it "This Is Home." And Melissa is in that video with me and some of my other students, and she interviewed them like what are you doing with this lady? What's going on here? And they talked about things we do, like going around and going for walks and being in the garden and understanding the grammar of landscapes that are pre-existing colonization, and being able to see work that was done, so that, like I was saying earlier, that things like land acknowledgements make sense. That we understand that when people came here, it was a home. And so also, like, I think back, even, I came here and I was like taking an education, I was taking food, I was taking water, I was being extractive when I came here. And I was like every minute I was here for so many years, going to school and then being a postdoc and then working here, I was like, okay, 5 more minutes and I'm leaving. And that just perpetuates colonization, which is like habits of exploitation. And so I thought, this just has got to stop. Like, it doesn't matter if I stay here 5 minutes more. How do I live here? And then when I don't live here anymore, my mom, she says, well, you just pick up your root and you take it with you. Like, it's about like learning how to have a home, even if it's in occupied, like, I'm not from here. I live on occupied land. I'm an occupier. And but I want this to be my home. I want to live in a way where the children I raise, I don't have my own children, unfortunately, but the children I raise can stay here forever in a good, sustainable way.
There's an article I read one time, and it makes a differentiation between home and home with a capital H. And I think that's what we got to learn, is how to live at home with a capital H. Right? Were there other questions?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Rachel and I are going to trade off. I've got one from the chat, which is, what about treaty resources for folks who are north of the border?
I'm assuming by north of the border, you mean Canada.
I think so. This is a question from Stacy.
Okay. Yeah. So she says yes. Yeah. So I think there are some similar studies going on. Alan Ojig Corbier is a great resource. I've watched Alan's videos about wampum, and thinking about how do we examine these treaty relationships, not only between the United States and Indigenous people, but between Canada, Great Britain, France, other colonists who have made treaties with our people. And I think one of the things that I really appreciate is that Alan, and others have gone back and talked about the treaties between Anishinaabe and plants and animals. That is one of the first treaties. And then, the foundational treaties between the Anishinaabe and Great Britain, which is the sovereign predecessor of both the US and Canada, the Silver Covenant chain. And, and how we think about treaties, whether that's a pelagan, a pipe ceremony, or wampum, or other symbols of these agreements, and how they're part of our oral tradition, and how they're supposed to be living beings. One of my favorite pieces of the treaty transcript, it's in Anishinaabe, and when they translate it, it doesn't carry as much meaning. But when you look at it in Anishinaabe, when they place the neck medal, they have these medals that they would place around the Anishinaabe leaders' necks. And when they placed it, before they placed it around their neck, it was inanimate. When they placed it around the neck and it signified that a treaty had been made, that neck medal became animate in our language. It took on life. It was imbibed with a life that meant this is supposed to live on indefinitely. that to me is really important. And I think we have to look at the foundational aspects of both the U.S. And Canadian and, and other parts of the world. I mean, there's other treaty relationships with Indigenous peoples in other parts of the world.
That's interesting that you say that too, because when I was, okay, so you know how maybe in English, and I get all hung up in English too, like maybe I'm like too semantical or something, but I like pay attention to words. But like my language teacher, he talks about animacy and inanimacy, and he's like, sometimes you can upset elders by saying that there is inanimate stuff because it's all animate, and then when you think about English, you're like, okay, well, animate is like maybe it like moves or acts on its own, and then it's animate. But what you were describing just made me think that animacy means there's a relationship. So anything that is related in any way is animate, right? And so that is what I'm trying to teach, is that relatedness, so that there is nothing inanimate anymore. We understand like how we are related. And so sometimes I was talking with someone about this the other day, like it was about, they want to start this minor in like environmental justice and things like that. And I said, well, sometimes my students, when I ask them about like, oh, what will we do about this? They just shrug because they don't understand how they're related to it. Like they don't know how to fix it. It's just like out of their hands. It's like so intangible. Mm-hmm. And so what we're trying to do is just re-relate everything, because that's like a red flag of colonization. Sometimes like I don't know how to define it or not define it, but it's almost stuff that like just feels icky sometimes, like just like makes my skin crawl. So one of the things would be all of those cars going by just made me lose my train of thought. But that like the first thing in colonization is you have to fragment things and dissociate them so that they're exploitable. So people carry around a moral fiber, like if I know how I'm related to something, I can't mistreat it. And I give my kids like the example of like road rage. Like if I'm driving around and somebody's being a bad driver, I might like, be mad until I know them or their grandma or somebody, or they're like my neighbor on my street, and then I can't be a jerk anymore. And so like if you look at like how Western education is set up to be like, okay, we're gonna take all the stuff that's like, when I say sacred, to me that means it's so complicated I can't hold it all in my head at one time. So because I can't do that, I like break it into like pieces, and so it makes it seem like it makes sense to like break it down and break it down and break it down. But then there's also this thread of like fierce independence. Like I was telling the kids, like, how many novels did you read as a kid about like some person in this situation that like elevated themselves above impossible scenarios to like just overcome it all by themselves? I was like, that is mythology. Like we are social creatures. We need each other to thrive. Like we're not hairy, we're not fangy, we're not clawy. We don't have the tools we need to like just like attack the world. We have got to depend on each other. So
although some of us are more hairy than others.
Some of us, I'm pretty hairy myself. But I'm still like pretty much defenseless. but so like just like if we're talking about decolonizing things, we're talking about like just relating whatever we can, whenever we can, with whoever we can, so that we don't just be jerks to everything, So I'm glad you said that. Thank you.
Looked like we have another question in the Q&A.
Yeah, we have a couple questions in here. The first one would be, what are some good cookbooks you all might recommend for our attendees to check out?
Oh,
yeah. Go ahead, Mae. You take first crack at it and I'll chime in.
I was like, Dr. Reinhardt is pretty good. I don't know. I was lucky that I had a grandma that taught me how to cook, and it was sort of like a intuitive kind of sense of flavors. I remember I was saying that my job, it was to make soup out of whatever, and you just, my cookbook is just time with ingredients. I would go on a walk. During COVID, I was a little bit afraid to go to the grocery store, and I'd go for a walk in the park across my street, and I would see what was ready, and then I would like figure out like I would figure out how to be a relative and how it was my relative and like how to enjoy it and how it was beautiful and what it tasted like, and then think like what would that taste good with. So I just sort of like played, you know, like, and not playing in like a wasteful way, but like I'm gonna eat this, and I would never post any of those pictures where it was, I tell my kids that there's a difference between like edible and something you want to eat. And I would never show you a picture of something that is edible, but you probably don't want to eat it. So there's, you know, spending time with food. Also, Melissa and I were talking in the car on the way over, like, I always had like allergies. Like I was always stuffed up my whole life. And I come from like people who were stuffed up, and we always had the lady I lived with when I was a kid, she had these giant Kleenexes. She called man-sized Kleenexes. We all had snotty noses all the time. And when I started foraging more, my allergies like dried up and went away. So just like when you were saying about like these things that we're inflicted with from, you know, having food that's not our food. And my students and I have talked about that too, because we're all like intersectional beings. Like they talk about their guts as being a product of this place and that place and this place, and what goes good in that like biome within them. But so you know probably more about cookbook.
So, well, let's see. I mean, obviously there's Sean Sherman's cookbook that he and Dana Thompson put together. And then Dana just also put out a cookbook with Valerie Segrest. And Tasha Hart just put out a recent cookbook. And let's see, I know I'm leaving some out, but yeah, there's some really good cookbooks coming out. Let's see, there was one that came out of Nephi's work, Nephi Craig. Geez, I'm blanking on. I know there's more out there, but if you start doing a Google search for Indigenous cookbooks, you're going to come up with some of those, and then also watching the some of the videos that are out about Indigenous foods now. They mentioned some of the cookbooks that were used in the credits. Oh, Pueblo Food Experience. There you go.
I think those videos are really helpful that people are making too, because you know, they're kind of doing it in a way too, like, you know, a pinch of this and it's and a pinch of that, you know, it's as interactive,
Yeah, you know,
as it could be during COVID. And also I was just telling Melissa how you came and cooked with us too. Like,
yeah, that was fun.
It's the cooking with people that really makes the difference. I learned so much. Like I was telling Melissa on the way we drove home from the garden, and I was so nervous about this, not only because you're so smart and well prepared, but also because all the people in this conversation for the next 2 days are people I love and I miss terribly. And yeah. I'm so thankful and indebted to those people for teaching me how to cook and sharing seeds with me. Like my life is infinitely richer now because of those interactions and those relationships. And I just wanted to do a good job. And like, that's about like that moral fiber, like I am indebted to these people. I want to be a good person. I want to like reciprocate to my world because I have been shared with. And so yeah, those videos are awesome.
Yeah.
And I cannot wait till the spring.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
And also I don't mean to like I don't know how hard it is to like the people at NAFSA and Intertribal Ag are so generous with connecting us with information and each other. Whenever you see those scholarships, because then you'll become part of a cohort or a group where you'll be with people who know different stuff than you, and they're posting videos and they're shared among the group. And so there's ways to get woven in, even if you're just like a rookie like me, just like looking to learn, and it's a really good thing to kind of keep track of these organizations, because they really mean for us to learn and to live better lives.
I know we're just about, in fact, we are out of time for our session. Do we want to maybe take one last question, if that okay?
Yeah, Marty, there's one last question in here specifically for you. Kitty is wanting to know if you've collaborated with Brian Yazzie from the Dream of Wild Health Farm.
Yeah, so Brian and I have run in the same circles for a while. Of course, he's a chef, and he's an amazing chef. I'm not a chef. I'm just somebody who likes to eat indigenous foods. So, I really a lot of respect for Brian's work, and I know he's touched the lives of thousands of people in his work. My gosh, I can't tell you how many people they've been feeding, but it's amazing the amount of food that comes out of his kitchen. And, especially during the time of COVID, when it's so difficult for people to access food in general, but even to access indigenous foods, he's making it much more accessible. And especially, for folks who may not be chefs like myself, may not have the background, the knowledge to prepare their own. Sometimes we got to ease into it, and sometimes it's just easier when other people who do have that knowledge help us. Plus, he just makes it so damn good.
Well, yeah, to wrap up here, I'll say that conversations about how university land can be accessed or returned will be probably a part of a session tomorrow as well. David Mitchner posted a little bit about that in the chat, a good place to continue those thoughts. I'd like to close with an idea from Mae, and it's that relationality is at the heart of our work to decolonize the classroom. And I have seen that in your work, Marty, and now that I'm learning about your work, Mae, thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Yeah, miigwech for the opportunity to share some of the work that we do. Appreciate it.
Miigwech. And also, like, again, I'm just honored to work with all of you, because you are giants in my mind. So thank you for, pulling me along to get some experience and meet some more relatives. And so miigwech, miigwech.
That was a great session. Thank you, Marty and Mae. I'm just going to pull our schedule back up here. So now we're going to have a half an hour break, and we're going to be playing another recorded webcast from Intertribal Ag Council's Mighty Networks platform. For those who weren't on earlier, when I was talking about Mighty Networks, we have, when we have breaks, we're going to be playing some of the recorded sessions. And those recorded sessions, we've got dozens of them from the past intertribal food summits. And then we also have another workshop that was the virtual Intertribal Food Summit last year that has 13 live sessions with almost 50 different recorded sessions. So a great wealth of information there. And these recordings will also be available on that Mighty Networks platform. We're trying to get them up either later today or by tomorrow. So if you missed anything, you can go back and you can check it out there for everything that is recorded live. We're not going to be recording, of course, the recordings we already have. You can go and check those out on Mighty Networks. A couple other quick notes on the schedule. My name is Dan Cornelius. I work for the Intertribal Agriculture Council. I also teach a couple of classes at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And tomorrow afternoon, I'm actually going to be teaching my class. It's called Land Education, and we're going to be braiding corn. We're going to be cooking hominy and parching some wild rice. So internet connection permitting, actually planning on doing for our well-being break in the afternoon. Should hopefully be coming live from the field to you there. So just a quick note on that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Abby to play another recording from Mighty Networks, and we will be back in about half an hour.
to read a bio at all? A short one?
Whatever, you know, I don't care. Honesty, say whatever